Welcome to Oli Ola, the Storyteller. Stories of real events and the fate of people, both in the present and the future. As I thank you for listening to this story, I would like to encourage you to subscribe to our channel, like and comment. There is also a link in the description if you want to support this initiative. Thanks and enjoy.
The Price of Silence. Chapter 1. A Gift Revealed. Lydia Hall stood at the front of her fourth grade classroom, the buzz of students settling into their seats barely registering as her eyes landed on Malik Verma. He was tucked into the third row, his shoulders hunched and his gaze fixed not on the whiteboard, but on the edge of his notebook where his pencil danced. He didn't doodle aimlessly like most kids. His strokes were purposeful, clean. She glimpsed dragons, shadowy forests, and machines that looked like something out of a dream. "Malik," she said gently, "can you read the first line for us?" He blinked up at her like he'd been underwater, then slowly nodded. Rising with visible hesitation, he read aloud, voice trembling and flat. But Lydia noticed how the other kids didn't laugh. They didn't tease him. They didn't understand him. But they didn't torment him either. Malik moved in a bubble, unseen and untouched. After class, as the last of the students rushed out, Lydia approached his desk. "I love your drawings," she said. He looked away, shrugging. "Do you draw at home?" He hesitated. "Sometimes." "Would you ever show me more?" He gave the faintest nod, then darted out the door. That night, Lydia couldn't stop thinking about him. His brilliance was obvious, but so was his silence. And when she remembered the faint yellow bruise she'd glimpsed on his wrist as he reached for his pencil, her stomach knotted. She'd taught long enough to know what that could mean. She opened her laptop and reviewed school policy on reporting concerns. Nothing definitive, nothing solid, just instincts. But sometimes, instinct was all a teacher had. She made a note in her journal. Watch Malik more closely. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Halls. The next week brought a strange unease to the halls of Westbridge Elementary. Lydia noticed it in small things. How Malik avoided group work more than usual. How he winced when another child bumped into him. He flinched when voices were raised. During lunch, he sat alone, drawing instead of eating. One day, Lydia passed him in the hallway as he walked with his father, a tall, rigid man with cold eyes and a military posture. Mr. Verma kept one hand tightly on Malik's shoulder. The boy didn't smile, didn't even look up. "Mr. Verma!" Lydia greeted him with forced warmth. He nodded curtly. "Everything fine in class?" "Malik's very talented," she replied. "Quiet, but engaged." The father's lips pressed into a line. "He knows what's expected of him." They walked away. Inside the staff lounge later, Lydia raised her concerns carefully. "Has anyone else noticed Malik Verma's behavior? Just signs of something not right?" Most teachers shrugged. "He's brilliant," one said. "Just shy." "His dad gives me the creeps," another muttered. "But that's not enough, is it?" Lydia left the conversation more unsettled. The problem was that it was enough. For her, enough to act. Enough to worry. Chapter 3. The Sketchbook. It was a rainy Thursday when it happened. Malik forgot his sketchbook under his desk, wedged between a chair leg and a fallen pencil. Lydia found it after school and meant to return it the next day. But when she saw the edge of a page, red pencil slashed violently across the outline of a screaming face, she opened it. Page after page of darkness poured out. A boy behind bars. A belt hanging from a doorknob. a shadowed figure towering over a cowering child. One drawing showed the boy with a padlock over his mouth. Another, the boy curled in a closet, the word silence written over and over around him. Lydia froze. Her hands shook. This was not fantasy. This was confession. She took photos of each page. Then she sat at her desk until the sun dipped below the window and the janitor turned out the lights. She took the sketchbook home. She didn't sleep. The next morning, she placed it in a bag, marched to the principal's office, and said the words that would change everything. I believe one of our students is being abused. Chapter 4. Breaking the Silence. The next morning dawned grey and damp, a fine mist curling over the playground blacktop as Lydia parked her car. The sketchbook lay on the passenger seat beside her, its cover scuffed, its weight somehow heavier than paper. She stared at it, heart thudding, before reaching for it and stepping out into the cold air. She went straight to the principal's office. Mr. Grayson glanced up, already weary. "Ms. Hall, I need you to look at these again," she said, placing the sketchbook on his desk. He opened it reluctantly. As he flipped through the pages, something changed in his expression. Not just concern, but discomfort. Then came the page with the belt. He closed the book. "I see what you're saying," he admitted. "But this still isn't evidence. We can't—" "We must!" Lydia's voice cracked. "This boy is crying out, and if we stay quiet, we're complicit." Grayson shifted in his chair. "I'll refer it to CPS, discreetly." "Not discreetly," she said. "Immediately." She left his office shaken, but resolute. That evening she did something more. She wrote an email directly to the district superintendent and the child advocacy liaison, attaching photos of the drawings. She recounted every moment, bruises, flinches, the silence, and she ended with one line. "If this child disappears into silence, it will be on us." Then she clicked send. Rain lashed the windows that night as she waited, wondering if her voice would echo into the void or start an avalanche. Chapter 5. Beneath the Surface. Lydia's alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m., though she'd never fallen asleep. The night had been a restless swirl of rain and worry. Her inbox still showed no replies. Not from the district, not from the school board. Her pleas, it seemed, had vanished into silence. A silence all too familiar. The morning brought a low, grey sky that mirrored the heaviness in her chest. Westbridge Elementary stirred to life slowly, with children dragging backpacks and yawns across the concrete paths, teachers clutching coffee cups like lifelines. Lydia arrived early, as always, but today she didn't go straight to her classroom. Instead, she waited at the main office. Malik still hadn't shown up. "I can call the house," the secretary offered, thumbing through her directory with an air of forced normalcy. "No," Lydia said quickly, too quickly. I'll handle it." She returned to her classroom, but teaching fractions to distracted 9-year-olds felt obscene. Her voice trembled as she walked through the lesson, and when she caught herself staring at Malik's empty desk for the third time in 10 minutes, she gave the class a quiet reading period and sat down. That's when the door opened, and the world changed. Malik stood in the doorway, small and still, his backpack hanging loosely over one shoulder. His sleeves were pushed down, buttoned tight at the wrist, but his face was swollen beneath one eye, the skin purpled and raw. The class gasped. Lydia stood so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. "Malik," she said, heart hammering. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Lydia crossed the room, dropped to her knees, and looked him in the eye. "Do you want to talk to me?" He blinked slowly. Then, in the smallest voice she had ever heard, he said, "I thought you wouldn't come." That sentence broke something in her. She turned to the aide, whispering instructions. Then she took Malik gently by the hand and walked him to the nurse's office. The nurse gasped when she saw him, but Lydia was already dialing Child Protective Services. Again. This time she didn't describe. She demanded. And when the nurse returned with a cold compress and Malik flinched, Lydia saw it again. That storm in his eyes, the one he carried alone. The silence had a price, but maybe finally someone else would pay it. Word spread fast. An emergency meeting was called. Grayson avoided her eyes, but she stood her ground as CPS officials arrived, reviewed evidence, and finally took action. Malik was removed from his home. Lydia walked back to her classroom in a daze. The kids had questions she couldn't answer. Malik's desk sat empty again, but this time it meant something different. It meant change. Chapter 6. The Tipping Point. Lydia sat alone in the teacher's lounge, the clock ticking louder than it should. Outside, the school hummed with end-of-day energy, slamming lockers, hallway chatter, janitor carts rolling across tile. But she was far away from it all, staring down at a mug of untouched coffee gone cold. Malik had been placed in emergency foster care. She had only caught a glimpse as CPS agents walked him out to a waiting car. He hadn't looked back. The superintendent had finally responded to her email. The tone had been cautiously diplomatic. "We are reviewing the situation. We appreciate your diligence. We must, of course, follow procedure." Procedure. That word again. As if lives could wait. That evening she was invited, summoned, more like, to a meeting at the district office. The room was long and sterile, lined with laminated motivational posters and a stale smell of bureaucracy. Seated at the table were 3 board members, 1 legal advisor, the CPS liaison, and Grayson, who looked deeply uncomfortable. "Ms. Hall," the chairwoman began, "you have taken bold action. And while your concern is admirable, we must ask, did you follow proper reporting protocol?" Lydia took a breath. "Yes. And when the system stalled, I acted to protect a child." Silence. The legal advisor cleared her throat. "The drawings you submitted, disturbing, yes, but not definitive." "They were all we had," Lydia replied, "and they told the truth." Then the CPS liaison stepped in. "We've spoken with Malik. He's confirmed many of the events implied in the artwork. Physical abuse, verbal intimidation, nighttime confinement." That shifted the room. After an hour of questioning, the meeting adjourned with stiff nods. Lydia walked out into the night air, her knees weak but her spirit ignited. It wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Back at home, she received a voicemail, a gentle voice. "Hi, Ms. Hall. This is Mrs. Jennings. I'm Malik's new foster mum. He asked if you might call him when you can. He's okay, but he misses school, and he misses you." Lydia pressed her hand to her mouth. The next morning, she returned to class, her steps heavier than before, but her heart steadier. And when she looked at Malik's empty desk for the first time, she saw not loss, but hope. Chapter 7. Fractures and Light. The classroom felt different without Malik. His absence echoed in the smallest things, an empty chair, a quiet corner that once held an ocean of unspoken pain. Lydia caught herself glancing over, still expecting to see his hunched figure bent over a drawing. But the desk stayed vacant, a solemn memorial to everything he had endured, and everything she had risked to speak for him. The school, too, seemed uneasy. Whispers floated through the halls, not of childish gossip, but of adult discomfort. Some teachers looked at Lydia with admiration, others with caution, even judgment. She had broken ranks, made noise, demanded attention in a place that prized calm. Mr. Grayson summoned her to his office. Again. He folded his hands, clearing his throat. "Lydia, you should know this investigation has caused some unrest with the district. You bypassed protocol, sent direct messages to board members. There are procedures." "There are children," Lydia interrupted, her voice calm but steely. "And one of them was in danger. Protocol be damned." He blinked, hesitated, then to her surprise nodded. "I don't disagree with your motives, but you've made people nervous." "Good." The silence between them stretched taut. Then Mr. Grayson sighed and leaned back. "The board wants a report, a summary of events, your observations, documentation. Clean, professional." "I already wrote most of it," Lydia said. "I've lived every second of it." When she returned to her classroom, a small envelope sat on her desk. No name, just folded paper inside. A drawing. Simple. 2 hands reaching out from opposite sides of the page. Not signed, but the style was unmistakable. Malik. She clutched it like a lifeline. Weeks passed. Malik remained in temporary foster care while the case unfolded. Lydia was kept at arm's length, bound by legal walls and confidentiality clauses. But she found comfort in small updates. He was eating better, speaking more. His art was being encouraged. He asked for books. She'd done what she could. She'd forced the silence to speak. But even victories left scars. Lydia found herself crying unexpectedly, sometimes while washing dishes, sometimes when the wind carried the scent of rain like it had that night she sent the email. She second-guessed everything. What if she had waited longer? What if the bruises had faded? What if no one had listened? But they had. And a boy was safer now. Then, one afternoon, just as the school year was drawing to a close, a visitor came. It was Montes. "I got permission to share something with you," he said, offering a sealed manila envelope. Inside, a thank you. Chapter 8. Echoes that Heal. The school year rolled into its final weeks, with bulletin boards bursting with end-of-term projects and classrooms buzzing with rehearsals for spring assemblies. But for Lydia, everything still pulsed with the rhythm of Malik's absence, and the hope his recovery kindled. She continued to receive updates from Mrs. Jennings. Malik had started talking in short bursts. He had asked for paints and then watercolours. He now slept through the night without nightmares, most of the time. One morning, Lydia received a package at her classroom door. Inside was a carefully wrapped canvas. It showed a tree split in half, one side barren and grey, the other bursting with leaves, birds in mid-flight. In the corner, a small signature, MV. It hung on her wall by the end of the day. Students noticed. "Who made that?" one asked. "An artist," she replied, a brave one. The end-of-year ceremony came quickly. Lydia was asked to speak, and she surprised even herself by accepting. She stood on the stage, the lights glaring, and told a carefully worded story, not naming names, not revealing details, but speaking of the power of listening, of what it means to act, even when no one else will. She ended with a quote she'd written down years ago, but never dared to say aloud until now. "The world changes, not by noise alone, but by the courage to speak truth into silence." The room stood in applause. That evening, as she locked up her classroom, she found a note taped to her door. It was from Montes, the CPS worker. He's coming back next fall. Her hand trembled. She let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for months. Echoes of fear had been replaced with echoes of healing. And they were loud. Chapter 9. Truth on the Record. Summer drifted by with a quiet grace. Lydia spent her days preparing new materials, organizing her classroom, and, when she let herself rest, reading books she'd been too distracted to touch all year. But her thoughts always returned to Malik. When fall arrived, he came back. He walked into the classroom taller, his hair longer, and his backpack covered in stitched patches. He didn't wear long sleeves anymore. There was still a gentleness in his eyes, but the fear was gone. When Lydia met him at the door, he didn't wait. He stepped forward and hugged her. "I'm glad I'm back," he said. "I'm ready." Lydia blinked back tears. "Me too." Malik took his old seat. The classroom felt whole again. But there was more. One morning, Lydia received a call from the district office. They wanted her to appear before the board. This time, not for scrutiny, but for testimony. A legal inquiry had been launched into how the original complaints had been handled. Lydia's voice had started a chain reaction, and now Malik's case was being used to push for systemic reform. She sat in a large, echoing chamber, surrounded by lawyers, administrators, and advocates. She brought the sketchbook with her. "I'm not here to assign blame," she said into the microphone. "I'm here to show what it looks like when we wait too long to listen." She spoke for 20 minutes. Calm, clear, unapologetic. When she left, reporters waited outside. One of them, young and eager, shoved a microphone toward her. "Do you think the system failed?" She paused, then said, "The system isn't a machine, it's people. And when people ignore the signs, they become part of the harm. Yes, it failed, but it doesn't have to again." That quote ran in newspapers the next day. Malik's artwork, his tree, was published beside it. Parents began asking more questions. Schools revised their reporting policies. Training was updated. More teachers came forward with concerns about other students. The silence cracked wide open. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And it started with one voice. Chapter 10. The Fire Within. The new school year opened with crisp September skies and the scent of sharpened pencils. Lydia Hall stood at her classroom window, watching students spill into the playground with backpacks too big for their frames. But her focus was on one boy, now a little taller, his hair combed neatly, confidence in every step. Malik. He waved at her through the window, not timidly, not hesitantly, boldly. She waved back, her heart full. The classroom was different now, not just in decor, but in spirit. Lydia had changed. So had the school. A poster hung near the front door. Every voice matters. Every silence speaks. Staff meetings now included trauma awareness modules. Reporting procedures had been updated. More than that, there was openness. Teachers talked, shared, asked questions they once buried. But the real fire was in the students. Malik was no longer the quiet boy in the corner. He raised his hand, read aloud, led a small lunchtime art club. Other students brought him ideas for comics, and he brought them to life in bright ink and wild imagination. He'd even written a short story about a boy who found his voice in a dream world, guarded by lions made of light. Lydia knew he was healing, not just surviving, but thriving. One afternoon, Malik approached her with something behind his back. "I made this," he said, handing her a new painting. It showed a teacher standing at the edge of a forest, a lantern in hand. Behind her, children followed, their faces lit by the glow. In the corner, 3 words were etched. You lit the way. Lydia couldn't speak. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were warm, not heavy. That evening, she wrote a letter. Not to the board, not to CPS, to herself. You did not break the rules. You broke the silence. You were not reckless. You were brave. And you will do it again, if you must. For there are always more Maliks, more sketchbooks, more walls built of silence. But now, she carried fire.